So this is another Thunder Creek streamer from Keith Fulsher's book. This one is made with Marabou instead of bucktail. It's just a different kind of spin on the Thunder Creeks. When I was in Maine a number of years ago fishing for landlocked salmon, these Marabou Thunder Creek streamers it was similar to the Thunder Creek, but they called it something else. I can't remember, but they were very popular. Anyway, this one, not only will I show you the steps from his book in making the streamer, but this one is going to use epoxy on the head, as well as some enamel paint, and then a top coat of epoxy over those eyes. And this is the steps that he actually goes through in his book when he explains how he finishes the heads on these. And I'll include a little bit of information in there also on the curing time for the epoxy, the time you have to wait between coats for the enamel. All of that has to kind of be factored in terms of whether you want to use actual epoxy. It's a 30-minute epoxy, or if you prefer the version I did with the solar res, or even the 5-minute epoxy. So that is the Marabou streamer, Thunder Creek. I'll get started time. I'm going to start this Thunder Creek streamer with my hook and the vise. This is a Mustad R74S. The S designates it's a straight eye. It's just like an R74, but it's a straight eyed instead of a downturned eye, and this is a size 6. I'm going to debarb the hook, and I'll attach my thread. Thread, I'm using a Danville 70 Denier in white. Just like the other Thunder Creek streamers that I've done, videos in the last few weeks that I've done, this pretty much starts out the same way, probably with the exception of the largemouth bass because it has the black floss body and rib on it. I'm going to start behind the eye of the hook and advance down. The head is going to end up about a third of the way down the shank of the hook here, so I want to stop about halfway, and I'm going to tie in some silver flash. I'm using some flash accent here. I'm just going to get 3 or 4 strands. I'm going to bring these up under the thread here. I want to keep this on top of the hook shank. Advance my thread down a few wraps. Then I'm going to fold this over. I don't want to pull on this real hard. I just want to hold it in a rear facing direction. If I pull on it, it actually kind of takes some of the kink out of it, and it's a little wild on you. Bring my thread down to the end of the head space. I'm going to trim this maybe an eye length, 2 eye lengths beyond the bend of the hook. Not super long. Bring my thread forward to just behind the eye. If you've watched any of the other Thunder Creek streamers that I've done, this is tied just like they were tied using bucktail, but we're going to use Marabou instead. Going to be some black Marabou along the back and white on the belly. Now, the one thing I can tell you about the black Marabou, and this is just a Wapsi product that I've got from them, so Hairline or Cascade Crest or somebody else who has it may not have this issue, but I routinely find that this Marabou, the dye, will run. It'll come off on your fingers, and it comes off when you moisten it, which we're going to do. Part of the process of doing the head here, and I'll explain later when we get there, is that we're going to put some clear lacquer on it to basically mat down the fuzzies before we put the epoxy on. Well, the problem is if that dye runs, the underside isn't as nice and bright white. It tends to get kind of a gray color to it, which may happen anyway. So I have gone ahead and washed this. I just ran it under some water, took a towel and, damp dried it and everything. And hopefully whatever loose dye on there will have come off. I'm going to take the longer Marabou pieces right here on the bottom that are kind of ragged peel those off. You can leave the tip in here if you want. I tend not to because I think it flows better without that rachis in there. Now I'm going to take all of these, clumping them together. I'm going to wet it down. You will want to have a dish of water here because we're going to wet this down numerous times while we're tying this just to keep it under control. I'm going to turn that around, and just like you would the bucktail that we did in the other ones, I'm going to measure this. I'm going to measure this so that it is just a little bit past that flash. So the tips are right behind the eye here. This is going to be my tie-in spot. So when I fold this over, it goes a little bit beyond the flash. And when I wrap this around, I'm simply collecting that marabou down. I'm really not cranking on that thread at all. I'm going to start wrapping rearward. You do not have to have nice touching turns while you're doing this. I'm going to get almost down to the end of the head space and chop off the rest of that marabou. Keep going down to kind of secure the butt ends of that. Not paramount because it all gets covered up. Bring my thread back up to just behind the eye of the hook. And again, you'll moisten this down. That's going to keep that under control so it doesn't all get pushed together. For the bottom, on both of these, you really want to select a feather that has, this blood quill has a very, very soft rachis to it on the inside. Okay. And the white, you're going to want to select one that has some nice long barbs coming off of it, because again, you're going to clip out the center. And Keith Fulsher, who developed this, mentions doing that partly because when this is on the underside, this will flow around the hook a lot easier without that rachis in there. So again, we're going to moisten that down. We want to, this here again is, it's important that that dye in the black marabou isn't running off on your hands and things, because then you're going to get it into the white here. I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to measure this so that it is tied in just a little bit shorter, if at least the same length as the black, but maybe even just a tad shorter. Again, just collecting that down. It kind of, as you can see, it kind of moved over to my side there. So a few wraps in there, I can pull on this and scooch it so it's right back up on the underside of the hook shank. Start wrapping down. Well, I've got some fibers that are apparently coming out on that white. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to unwrap this, and this happens sometimes with these. The tips are very, very fragile here. What you can do is just break those off. So I've got a little bit better tip end to that. Starting over, collecting that down to the hook shank here. Keeping the white and the black separated. I'll trim away the excess white and advance my thread down, kind of collecting all that together to the back end of the head here. I'm going to bring that white over. I'm going to fold it down. Before I tie that in, I'm kind of going to push this just a little bit. Now, you definitely have to pull a little bit on these and stroke these fibers a little bit while you're doing this, because it's very easy to get one that's not under tension like that right there, and it sticks out. Now, we can, when we put some lacquer on here, we can massage that a little bit with the lacquer and the epoxy, possibly even just cut that out if it bows out like that. But those are the fuzzies that I was mentioning to you. So after I fold this back, I'm going to, before I tie that in, I'm going to push down on that just a little bit with my thumb to try and spread it around. So half of it is, on that side, and see this it didn't spread around that well. So I'm going to take that back off. And now I'm going to push down a little bit more on the opposite side, like that, to try and get that a little more evenly distributed. Yeah, that works. See all these fuzzies? This is what I was talking about. So now my white is tied in. I can flip this over, moisten that black. And then remember keeping that under some tension. As I bring that over, I will get a few wraps in, push that down a little bit so it goes around the hook shank a little bit. See, there's one that I was talking about, but I'm going to leave that because I'm going to show you we can just cut that out. I'm going to get my band in here for tying all that down. That's where our gill flash will go in just a little bit. I'm not going to put any head cement on there because I'm going to put some lacquer on in just a second. But what we can do here with some of this, I got some short fibers here. We're going to try and get a lot of that down with the lacquer, but you can, if you want, try and trim some of those. Now that little black piece there, I'm just going to cut close right down to the head there and see if I can't pull it out. If not, I'm just going to cut the other side. And that's fine. The white has a lot more fuzzies to it than the black. But this is where, for the Marabou, for the bucktail, generally we don't do this, but for the Marabou, he recommends getting some sort of head cement, maybe a Sally Hansen's, if that's what you use, or a Hardest Hull, or something like that, and putting just a light coat on it. And as it's starting to dry, or set, you're going to kind of keep stroking it down to get these fuzzies to lay down. So that's what we're going to do. I've got this is a Vineyards clear lacquer, a Cellier, Cellire. If anybody knows the correct pronunciation of that, let me know. Cellier, I think, is what it would be. And I'm just going to take a little bit of this clear lacquer and start putting it on here. I don't want to flood this, but I do have to have enough on here to get those fuzzies kind of locked down. Even after we do this, if needed, before we put the epoxy on, we can trim a little bit of this stuff out. So we can smooth this out. The whole point of this is to smooth out that Marabou for the epoxy head on this. The bucktail generally doesn't need to be smoothed out like this. And this is just a very basic Marabou Thunder Creek. You could do different colors, blue instead of black if you want, for different bait fish, things like that. Now it looks like some of that isn't getting stuck in the lacquer. It keeps folding up like a little cowlick or something. But as you keep working this, and that lacquer starts to flash off, you'll notice that those little things don't pop up anymore. They get stuck in the lacquer and they get smoothed off. So that's enough lacquer on there. I'm just going to take a minute to keep working this back so it all lays down. Even some of those that kind of you get that little loop where it's not under the same tension. Sometimes you can work those down into that lacquer so it just lays flat down in there and you no longer see it. I got one right there that keeps popping up, but that lacquer is curing and therefore getting tackier, and it's starting to hold on to it. So I'm just going to keep doing that for a moment. Again, I think I've got enough lacquer on there. Make certain everything gets down. If I have something that pops up while it's, I think it's all down, I walk away, let it set up for another 5-10 minutes, and I come back and something popped up, I can take some tweezers and or scissors and cut that out. But the next step on this is going to be some epoxy. I'm going to use some Devcon epoxy. It's a 30-minute epoxy. It's the same one that Keith Fulsher uses, he recommends in his book. So we're going to go that route. We're going to do the epoxy. Then I got to let the epoxy set. The epoxy is going to take a good 12 hours, 10, 12 hours to set up so it's not tacky and everything. But we will continue the fly in just a few minutes with the epoxy. So the lacquer has all set up on this, and as you can see, I pretty much have all those fuzzies all lashed down. The white down here still looks a nice bright white because I washed that black Marabou prior to tying that in, so that definitely helps. So we're ready for the epoxy now. Keith Fulsher, he recommends using what he would use is a Devcon epoxy. He mentions a 2-ton epoxy. This is the Devcon. If you look for it, you'll find it's a 2-ton. That's the strength of it, basically. It's a 2-part epoxy. It's a 30-minute curing epoxy. The thing is, the 30 minutes, during that time, you have to keep it moving. You can't just let it sit like this and put it on there because during the 30 minutes, it'll droop off. So I use a fly turner. He doesn't recommend one. He doesn't like them. He does it a different way. I recommend a fly turner. This is one I've had for many years. It's from a company called Flex Coat. They also make various epoxies and everything. This is basically just a little motor inside here, turns this foam. I'll show you in a second here. But you put the epoxy on, stick the fly in here, and then let it just turn. And this will turn for, I'll probably have this turn for 12 hours. At least it'll turn for 4 or 5. Because I have had in the past 30-minute epoxies. If you let it turn for 30 minutes or even an hour, I've had, when I stop it and come back 10 hours later, I have had the epoxy droop. Not so bad with the 30-minute, it will set up, but certainly a rod wrapping epoxy, which is like a 10-hour epoxy, even if you turn it for 15, 16 hours, I've stopped it and then had the flies droop on me. So I usually will increase the turning time by a factor of 4 or 5. So if it's a 30-minute, it's at least going to turn for 2 hours, if not 2.5 to 3 hours. However, that said, the epoxy, even though it is set and it won't droop and shift on you or anything, it still is tacky. What I find is that this particular epoxy has to set for 12 hours. So from the time you put it on, it's going to be at least 11, 12 hours before you're ready to put the eyes on this. And that's fine. As I go along, I'll tell you how long it takes the eyes to cure on each step and so on and so forth. But I've already got some epoxy mixed up. If you've never used these before, then you've got a hardener and a resin, and you just put equal parts of each, mix it up. Because it's a 30-minute, I mix it at least for 60 seconds, maybe even 2 minutes. you're going to put a thin coat of epoxy on here. So I just get a drop and start smearing it around in the center like this, and then work my way out. The 30-minute is nice because it's less likely to have bubbles in it, whereas a 5-minute will usually have a lot of bubbles in it, and it's harder to get those out, and your resulting fly ends up with some bubbles in the epoxy. But I just spread this back and forth. I want to cover up these thread wraps in the back as well. I want to get just a little bit of epoxy on there. And you just need to get enough on here so that it covers everything up nice and smooth. You don't want a thick coating on here that ends up making it look, round and bulbous or anything. You just want enough so that it covers everything up and it's all nice and smooth. Once this has been on the turner and it's all set, we're going to come back and paint some eyes on this, some white eyes with black pupils, and we're going to put a little bit of red enamel on the underside here for our gill flash. So that's it. That's really about it. Now this head's got a little bit of a dent right over here. That I think is just how the Marabou got tied in. But it's shaping up pretty well. It's all smooth. I don't have any rough spots where I didn't get any epoxy on there. You could probably see from a look at the light glare on it. As it goes around here, I'm looking at the light glare to see that I've got everything covered nice and uniform. So with that done, you can again wet down that Marabou to control it a little bit better. I'm going to put this on the turner. Hopefully that's in focus. The one caveat you want to try and make is that this is fairly level, because as this is turning, if that head is at an angle like this, it's probably out of focus. If the head is at an angle like this or down, you could end up with some of that epoxy drooping the other way. But once I have that on there, I just get the epoxy turning. And I'm just going to set this aside, and that's going to turn for, like I said, at least 3 hours or so. And once that's tack free, hopefully you can hear me just fine over the sound of that thing turning. But once that is tack free, we'll come back and we will put our eyes on. So now it's time to put the eyes on our Thunder Creek Marabou streamer. The epoxy turned for about 5 hours on the turner and then sat overnight. So it's tack free. It's all set up real nice. You could probably let it turn for a couple of hours and then after 5 or 6 hours paint the eyes on if you wanted to, because it's just a thin layer of paint that we're putting on this. But I like to let it go for at least 12 hours just because then it's all set up and no concerns of it still being a little tacky. Now to paint the eyes on, I'm using some Testors modeling paint. This is also what Keith Fulsher likes to use, but I've used these for years for poppers and other things. So that's what we're going to use. To put the eyes on, it's nothing complicated. Get yourself some toothpicks, and you take one toothpick and just cut it off anywhere, where its greatest diameter. That's going to be the white. The other one you're going to cut about halfway down the taper right here, because then it's just a smaller diameter than the rest of the toothpick, and that's going to be the black pupil. Right now, I'm just going to put the white on as well as the gill flash. I'm going to have to let it set for about 3 hours before I can put the black pupil on. Then I have to let it set for about another 3 hours. It'll all be set up. And then we're going to put a little dollop of epoxy just over the eyes. So you take your applicator, little toothpick here, and it's really simple. You just get half a drop on the end of it, And then brace your hand, and you're just going to, right on the side, just put a little drop like that. That's probably even too much. You're not necessarily wanting to have a round, and that will flash off and shrink. Try to get your other one on the opposite side. I'm usually off just a little bit. I imagine with practice and doing these, you can get more consistent results. Now for the gill flash, I'm going to use my bodkin. If you're going to use a paintbrush, a small crafting and modeling paintbrush, I would recommend cutting most of the bristles off to where you just have just one or two small bristles, because you don't need much. Just like the other Thunder Creek streamers that I did in the other videos, we're simply going to put some red on the lower half of this white band right here, which gives it just kind of a little bit of a gill flash. That's all it's for. You want to make certain that you don't touch the Marabou with this. You don't have to totally cover the thread wraps. You just want to get a little bit of a band on the bottom. You don't want to touch the Marabou. I did just right there, but what it does is the Marabou will suck up the paint a little bit. And unfortunately, I was too busy thinking about what I was going to say. I just touched the Marabou right there, but it looks like it's not going to be spreading or anything. So you just want to get a little band of red on the lower half of those thread wraps. Again, this is going to sit for about 3 hours, and then I'll come back and I'll get the pupils on. Another 3 hours. I'll put a little bit of epoxy, the same epoxy, on just the eyes. And once that's set up, our Marabou Thunder Creek streamer is done. So the white eyes on, or I should say the white portion of the eyes for the Marabou Thunder Creek has all set up. Actually, that enamel, it's been sitting there for about 3 hours, maybe 6 hours, actually 6 hours. But the enamel, because the enamel actually dries from the outside inward, it may take a few days before even that much is fully set up. You could heat it with a heat gun, things like this, but it's not worth it. It is set, it won't droop or anything, but it just takes a little bit longer. So now I'm going to put the black pupils on. As I mentioned, I'm just using another toothpick, but all I've done is just where the taper is on that toothpick, I've cut it about halfway so that it's a little bit narrower than the white. I don't need a lot. I just need a little black dot right in the center. And then I'll get the other side. If you want, you can even just touch this down, just like that. See, that one turned out a lot better. That one's nice and round. The other one wasn't bad. I find that it just takes a little bit of practice figuring out how much of the enamel to get on the end here, and then touching it so that you're just getting that drop, just to touch it, go around, and then pull it back before it shimmies one way or another, and you get kind of an odd pupil. But that's generally how it should look. So I'm going to let that sit for anywhere from 3 to 6 hours, probably about 3 hours. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to put the last coat of epoxy over just the eyes. You can put some over the gill flash if you want to, just to protect it. And that's all the epoxy is over this, is just to protect it so that it lasts a little bit longer while you're fishing. So I'll be back in a few hours after that sets up, and we'll get the last step on our Thunder Creek all done. So the enamel eyes have set up enough. There's probably still going to be curing just a little bit, but they're not runny or anything. So I can go ahead and put the final coat of the epoxy right on the outside. I'm doing this just by another toothpick right here. And again, I'm just putting a little drop. It's just going to cover just the eyes right there. One advantage to that is it also does kind of magnify them just a little bit. Doesn't have to be a huge amount of epoxy. It's just enough to cover up those eyes so that they're protected. If you want, you could put some along the underside there of the gill flash, but that's not what Keith Fulsher does in his book. Doesn't mean that it's not something that you couldn't do, but I'm just getting a little bit off the bottom. I drag just a little bit over. Anyway, I just wanted to do the steps just like he does in the book, just to demonstrate it. So now the initial epoxy's on, our paint, and the final epoxy on the outside is all on, and that's done. So once that cures, which I will put this on the fly turner in just a little bit, but once that cures and is fully set up, then our Thunder Creek Marabou streamer is now complete. Thanks for watching. Thank you for joining me at the Vice today. I hope you learned a new pattern, at least a tip or trick here and there. If you'd like to help Dress Irons, you can like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things for the video. You can also head out to dressedirons.com where you can buy flies, tools, stickers, and merch, or you can join a growing community over on Locals at the Dressed Irons Fly Tying Guild. You can also donate to Dressed Irons if you want through the link at the bottom of the description. I thank everybody for their ongoing support, as it really does help the creation of these videos. And what's important is to remember, only fly tying. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.